The parking lot of Murphy's gas station sat baking under the Arizona sun, where 12 Harley-Davidsons gleamed like predators in formation. The Hells Angels had stopped for fuel and beer, their leather cuts displaying patches that told stories of blood, brotherhood, and violence that stretched across 3 decades. When 8-year-old Emma Martinez approached their circle with tear-streaked cheeks, asking for help finding her way home, the bikers erupted in cruel laughter. "Lost little princess needs her mummy," Snake sneered, his scarred face twisting into a grin. But Emma didn't flinch. Instead, she pointed at the lead bike, a custom 1987 Harley Softail with distinctive flame detailing, and said words that turned their world upside down. "My dad has the same bike as you. He showed me pictures before the bad men took him." The laughter died instantly, because that particular bike belonged to their missing president, Diablo Martinez, who'd vanished 6 months ago with $250,000 of cartel money. Now his daughter stood before them, possibly the only link to finding him alive, or the key to their own survival. But who were the bad men she mentioned, and how much did this little girl really know? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tank Williams, the club's massive sergeant-at-arms, was the first to break the silence. His 300-pound frame cast a shadow over the small girl as he crouched down to her eye level. "What's your name, kid?" "Emma." Her voice was barely a whisper, but her dark eyes held a steadiness that reminded him eerily of Diego. "Emma Martinez." The name hit the gathered bikers like a physical blow. Chains Martinez, a grizzled veteran with grey streaking his beard, stepped forward, his weathered hands shaking slightly. "Holy shit," he breathed. "Diego never told us he had a daughter." Snake spat into the dust, his earlier amusement replaced by suspicion. "Could be a setup. Cartel sends a kid to get us to lower our guard." "She's 8 years old, you paranoid bastard," growled Hammer, though his own hand instinctively moved closer to the knife on his belt. Emma watched their exchange with an intelligence that seemed far too mature for her age. She reached into the pocket of her dirty sundress and pulled out a crumpled photograph. With small fingers, she smoothed it against her leg before holding it up. The image showed Diego Martinez astride his custom Harley, his arm around a beautiful Hispanic woman. Between them sat a younger version of Emma, maybe 6 years old, grinning toothlessly at the camera. On the back, in Diego's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "My girls, Emma and Maria, 2021. Tank took the photo with surprising gentleness, his massive hands dwarfing the small piece of paper. The resemblance was undeniable. Emma had Diego's eyes, his stubborn chin, even the same way of tilting her head when thinking. "Where's your mama, sweetheart?" Tank asked, his gruff voice softening. Emma's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she wrapped her thin arms around herself. "The bad men took her too. They came to our house 3 days ago. Mama hid me in the closet and told me to stay quiet no matter what. I heard her screaming and then nothing." The bikers exchanged grim looks. They all knew what nothing usually meant in their world. "What did these bad men look like?" Chains asked, kneeling beside Tank. They had tattoos on their necks, like snakes, and they spoke Spanish, but it sounded different than how Mama and Papa talk. Tank's jaw tightened. Neck tattoos of snakes could only mean one thing: Los Serpientes, the cartel faction that had been muscling into Hell's Angels territory for the past year. If they had taken Diego's family, it meant the missing $250,000 wasn't the only thing at stake. This was personal now. Emma wiped her nose on her sleeve and looked up at the circle of intimidating faces surrounding her. "Are you Papa's friends?" He said, "If I ever got in trouble and saw bikes like his, I should find the man with the president, Patch, and tell him I'm Diablo's daughter." Snake laughed bitterly. "Well, ain't that just perfect? Diablo's kid shows up looking for a dead man." "We don't know he's dead," Tank snapped, though they all suspected otherwise. Emma's head snapped up. "Papa's not dead. I can feel it. He promised he'd always come back to me and Mama. He keeps his promises." The faith in her voice was heartbreaking. These men had seen enough death and betrayal to know that promises meant nothing in their world. But looking down at this brave little girl who'd somehow found them against impossible odds, Tank felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. He stood slowly, his decision made. "All right, Princess, you found us. Now we're going to find your papa." The real question was whether they'd find him in time, or if Emma had just signed all their death warrants. The cigarette hung from Dutch's weathered lips as he studied the kid more intently. Something about her struck him as familiar, but he couldn't place what. She had those piercing green eyes that seemed too old for her face, and that defiant tilt to her chin that reminded him of someone from his past. "Mookie's dead, little girl," Dutch said finally, his voice gravelly from decades of smoke and whiskey. "Has been for 3 years now." The color drained from the child's face, but she didn't cry. Instead, she squared her shoulders and looked Dutch straight in the eye. "Then you're Dutch. He told me about you. Said you were his road captain before you became president." A chill ran down Dutch's spine. How could this kid possibly know about club hierarchy? More importantly, how did she know Mookie well enough to know about his relationship with Dutch? "Who the hell are you?" Viper interjected, stepping closer. His hand instinctively moved toward the knife on his belt. The girl ignored Viper completely, keeping her focus on Dutch. "My name is Sarah Mackenzie. Mookie was my daddy." The words hit the group like a sledgehammer. Dutch felt his knees nearly buckle. Mookie Mackenzie had been his best friend, his brother in every way that mattered. They'd ridden together for 15 years, fought together, bled together. But Mookie had never mentioned having a daughter. "That's impossible," Razor said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mookie didn't have any kids." "Yes, he did," Sarah replied firmly. "Mama never told him about me. She was scared of this life." She gestured around at the bikes and the leather-clad men, but she kept pictures, and when she got real sick before she died, she told me everything. She said if I was ever in real trouble, I should find the Iron Wolves, find Dutch. She said Daddy trusted you with his life. Dutch's mind reeled. 3 years ago, Mookie had been acting strange in the weeks before he died. Distant, distracted. Dutch had assumed it was because of the territory war with the serpents that was brewing, but now he wondered if there had been something else weighing on his friend's mind. "Prove it," Dutch said, though his voice lacked its earlier harshness. Sarah reached into her small backpack and pulled out a worn photograph. She handed it to Dutch with trembling fingers. The image showed a younger Mookie standing next to his Harley, his arm around a petite brunette woman. The woman was clearly pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. Dutch's breath caught. He remembered that bike, remembered when Mookie had it custom painted with flames down the sides. That was 8, maybe 9 years ago. And the woman. Dutch squinted at the photo. There was something familiar about her too. "Jenny Morrison," Dutch said suddenly. "Your mother was Jenny Morrison." Sarah nodded. "You knew her?" "She used to work at Murphy's Diner on Route 9. Mookie was crazy about her, but she disappeared one day. He looked for her for months." Dutch stared at the photograph, pieces of a puzzle falling into place. "She was pregnant. With you." "She was scared," Sarah repeated. "Scared of what might happen to me if I grew up around the club. So she left town, changed her name, started over, but she never stopped loving him." The bikers exchanged glances. This changed everything. In their world, blood meant everything. Family was sacred. And if this kid really was Mookie's daughter, "Where's your mother now?" Dutch asked gently. "Cancer took her 6 months ago," Sarah said, and for the first time her voice wavered. "I've been in foster care since then, but the people, they're not good people. The man, he—" She trailed off, but the implication was clear. Dutch felt a familiar rage building in his chest. The same protective instinct that had made him a fierce road captain now flared to life. "Did someone hurt you?" Sarah's small hands clenched into fists. I ran away yesterday. I walked all night to get here. Mama said this was where the iron wolves hang out. She said Daddy's brothers would protect his blood. Viper stepped forward, his earlier aggression replaced by something else entirely. If she's really Mookie's kid, then she's family, Dutch finished. He looked down at Sarah, seeing Mookie's stubborn determination reflected in her young face. But we need to be sure. There are people who might try to use a connection like this against us. I have more pictures, Sarah said quickly, and Mama wrote me a letter about Daddy. She told me things only someone who really knew him would know. Dutch nodded slowly. His instincts told him the kid was telling the truth, but 3 decades of surviving in a dangerous world had taught him to be careful. If Sarah really was Mookie's daughter, then she was under the club's protection now, but that also meant she was a target for their enemies. Tank, Dutch called to the largest member of the group. Take her inside, get her some food and water, we need to make some calls. The girl's words hung in the air like smoke from their exhausts. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach as he processed what she'd just said. Oh, my daddy's name is Tommy Reeves. He'd known a Tommy Reeves once, known him well enough to carry the man's blood under his fingernails for 3 days afterward, well enough to still wake up some nights with the echo of gunshots ringing in his ears. What's your mama's name, kid? Marcus asked, his voice carefully neutral. Sarah, the girl replied without hesitation. Sarah Michelle Reeves. She has long brown hair like mine, and she makes the best chocolate chip cookies in the whole world. Son of a bitch. Marcus remembered Sarah too. Pretty little thing who'd worked at the diner on Route 47. Tommy used to bring her around sometimes, back when things were different, back before the Scorpions had expanded into their territory and everything went to hell. When's the last time you saw your daddy? He continued, ignoring the questioning looks from his brothers. Lucy's face crumpled slightly. A long, long time ago. Mama says he went away when I was just a baby. She showed me pictures, though, and she told me if I was ever in really bad trouble, I should find the Iron Wolves and tell them who my daddy was. Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the group. Behind him, he could hear Skull muttering something under his breath, probably questioning his sanity for entertaining this conversation. But Marcus knew what the others didn't. He knew that Tommy Reeves had been one of them once, before pride and stupidity had torn everything apart. Look, kid, Diesel interrupted, stepping forward. We don't know nothing about your daddy, and we got business to... Shut up, Diesel. Marcus's command cut through the air sharp enough to draw blood. Diesel's mouth snapped closed, though his eyes flashed with barely contained anger. Marcus crouched down again, bringing himself to Lucy's eye level. Up close. He could see it now, the shape of her nose, the stubborn set of her jaw, hell, even the way she stood with her feet planted wide and her chin raised defiantly. Tommy Reeves written all over her, clear as day. Your mama ever tell you any stories about your daddy? About what kind of man he was? Lucy nodded eagerly. She said he was brave and strong, and that he rode a really loud motorcycle. She said he had friends who were like brothers to him, and that they all looked out for each other no matter what. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Sarah had painted Tommy as some kind of hero in her stories, conveniently leaving out the part where he'd betrayed his brothers and nearly gotten half of them killed. But looking at this little girl, Tommy's little girl, Marcus found he didn't have the heart to shatter those illusions. Marcus, Snake spoke up from behind him, his voice low and urgent. We need to move. Those Scorpion boys ain't gonna wait around forever. Marcus stood slowly, his mind racing. The smart play was obvious. Tell the kid they couldn't help her and send her on her way. They had enough problems without adding a lost child to the mix, especially one with Tommy Reeves's blood running through her veins. But as he looked down at Lucy, still clutching that ridiculous stuffed elephant and staring up at him with absolute trust in her dark eyes, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was guilt over what had happened to Tommy. Maybe it was the memory of Sarah's laugh echoing through the clubhouse all those years ago. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that no 8-year-old should be wandering these streets alone, regardless of who her daddy was. "Where exactly did you lose your mama, Lucy?" "At the big store, with all the bright lights. We were shopping for groceries, and there were so many people, and I saw this really pretty butterfly outside, and I just wanted to look at it for a second. But when I turned around, Mama was gone." Her voice got smaller with each word. "I looked and looked, but there were too many people, and I got scared." Marcus nodded. "The Megamart on the south side, probably. Busy enough that a kid could get lost in the crowd easy, but that was Scorpion territory now, which explained why Lucy had wandered so far before finding them. "All right," he said finally, the decision crystallizing in his mind like ice. "Here's what we're gonna do." The protest started immediately. Diesel stepped forward, his face red with indignation. "Marcus, you can't be serious. We got the Scorpions breathing down our necks, and you want to play babysitter to some stray kid?" "This ain't up for debate," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had kept the Iron Wolves together for 15 years. "The kid stays with us until we figure this out." The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Tank's massive frame cast a shadow over Maya as she stood clutching the photograph, her small fingers leaving wrinkles in the corners. The other bikers had formed an unconscious semicircle around them, their faces a mixture of disbelief and something darker, recognition. "Where did you get this?" Tank's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the sudden quiet of the garage it carried like thunder. Maya's chin trembled as she looked up at him. "It was in Mama's drawer. She told me if anything ever happened, if bad men came, I should find the iron serpents. She said to show them this picture and say—" She swallowed hard, the words catching in her throat. "Say what, kid?" "That Johnny Raven's daughter needs help." The photograph slipped from Tank's fingers and fluttered to the oil-stained concrete. Snake bent to retrieve it, his weathered hands surprisingly gentle as he brushed off the dirt. When he straightened, his usual smirk had vanished completely. "Jesus Christ, Tank. Look at her eyes. Look at her fucking eyes." Tank was already looking. Now that the shock had worn off, he could see what should have been obvious from the moment she'd walked through their door. The shape of her face, the stubborn set of her jaw, even the way she stood with her feet planted wide despite her obvious fear. It was Johnny all over again. "How long has your mama been gone, sweetheart?" Diesel asked, crouching down to Maya's eye level. His voice was softer than anyone had heard it in years. 3 days, maybe 4, I don't remember." Maya's lower lip quivered. "The bad men came to our house. Mama hid me in the crawl space under the kitchen and told me to count to 1,000 before I came out. When I did, she was gone, and they were gone, and there was blood on the floor." The temperature in the garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tank felt his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. Johnny Raven had been dead for 8 years, gunned down in a warehouse by rival dealers who'd thought they could muscle in on serpent territory. They'd been wrong about that, and Tank had made sure they learned their mistake the hard way. But Johnny had never mentioned having a daughter. "What's your mama's name?" Snake asked, still studying the photograph. Sarah Mitchell. But she used to be Sarah Raven before the bad man made us change it." Tank's blood turned to ice. "Sarah, Johnny's high school sweetheart, the one who disappeared without a word 3 months before Johnny died. The one Johnny had spent weeks looking for, driving himself half crazy with worry and rage. The one they'd all assumed had just gotten tired of the life and run off to find something safer. She'd been protecting their daughter, Johnny's daughter. "The bad man," Tank said carefully. "What did he look like?" Maya's face crumpled. Tall, really tall, with yellow hair and mean eyes. He had a scar right here. She traced a line down her left cheek. "Mama said he used to hurt my daddy and that's why we had to hide, but I guess he found us anyway." Tank exchanged glances with Snake and Diesel. They all knew that description. Vincent Kozlov, Johnny's former business partner turned bitter enemy. The man who'd ordered the hit on Johnny 8 years ago and had somehow slipped away before the serpents could return the favor. "Where have you been staying, Maya?" Diesel asked. "In the woods mostly, sometimes in empty houses. I found some crackers in one and another had water that still worked. She looked down at her filthy clothes, suddenly self-conscious. I know I'm dirty. Mama always said to stay clean, but— You did good, kid, Tank interrupted, his voice rough. You did real good finding us. But even as he said it, Tank's mind was racing through the implications. If Kozlov had found Sarah after all these years, it meant he was back in town. And if he was back, it wasn't just for revenge against a dead man, it was to tie up loose ends. Maya was the last link to Johnny Raven, the last witness to whatever had driven Kozlov into hiding 8 years ago, which meant she was in more danger than she could possibly understand. Razor, Tank called to the youngest member of their group, who'd been standing silent by the workbench. Get on the horn to Chains. Tell him we need a full prospect, now. Tank, Snake said quietly. We don't know what we're walking into here. This could be bigger than— I don't give a shit how big it is. Tank's voice carried the finality of a coffin lid slamming shut. Johnny died protecting his family. Far as I'm concerned, that makes her family too. He looked down at Maya, who was watching their exchange with wide, frightened eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler but no less certain. You're safe now, sweetheart. Uncle Tank's got you. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Tank's massive frame blocked out the afternoon sun as he stared down at the small girl, her words echoing in his mind like the ghost of a conversation he'd tried to forget for 8 long years. What did you say your name was, kid? Emma Rose Castellanos. She said it with the careful pronunciation of someone who'd been taught to speak clearly when giving important information. My daddy used to tell me about you. He said if I was ever in real trouble, really bad trouble, I should find Tank Morrison and tell him who I was. The wrench slipped from Diesel's grease-stained fingers, clattering against the concrete floor. Razor's cigarette burned forgotten between his lips. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the moment, letting the last notes of an old Stones song fade into nothing. Tank's weathered face had gone pale beneath his grey beard. He crouched down slowly, his knees protesting, until he was eye-level with the girl. This close he could see it, the shape of her nose, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way she held her shoulders straight despite the fear dancing in her dark eyes. Miguel never told me he had a daughter, Tank said, his voice barely above a whisper. He said it was safer that way, that some secrets were like armor. Emma's lower lip trembled slightly. But he also said if something happened to him, if the bad men found him, I should remember everything he taught me about staying hidden and getting help. Tank's mind raced backward through the years. Miguel Castellanos, DEA agent, undercover operative, and the only federal officer Tank had ever trusted. The man who'd saved his club from a devastating setup, who'd fed them information about rival gangs dealing in territories they shouldn't touch, who'd disappeared one night without explanation or goodbye. When did you last see your daddy, Emma? 3 days ago. Her voice cracked on the words. Men came to our house. They had guns and they were asking about files, about something Daddy hid. Mama told me to run to Mrs. Chen next door, but when I looked back, she squeezed her eyes shut. There was fire. Behind Tank, he heard Viper curse under his breath. Red stepped closer, his usual swagger replaced by something resembling protective instinct. These were hard men, violent men when necessary, but there were lines even they wouldn't cross, and hurting kids was carved in stone at the top of that list. The men, Tank said carefully. Did you see them? Could you describe them? Emma nodded, pulling something from her pocket, a crumpled piece of paper covered in crayon drawings. Daddy taught me to remember faces, to draw what I see. He said it was a game, but I think he knew. Tank studied the crude but surprisingly detailed sketches. 3 men, one with a distinctive scar running from his temple to his jaw, another with intricate tattoos covering his neck. The third drawing made Tank's blood run cold. A face he recognized, a man who'd been asking questions around town about old DEA operations and missing evidence. Jesus Christ, Razor muttered, looking over Tank's shoulder. Isn't that— Yeah. Tank's jaw clenched. Antonio Vega's crew. They'd been sniffing around for weeks. Emma tugged on Tank's leather vest. Are they the bad men Daddy was afraid of? Tank looked into those trusting eyes and felt something shift inside his chest, a protective fury he hadn't experienced since his own daughter had been young. Miguel had risked everything to keep his family safe, had trusted Tank enough to give his daughter an escape route through the most unlikely guardian angels imaginable. Where have you been sleeping, Emma? The last 3 nights? In the old church basement. Daddy showed me how to get in through the broken window. I've been eating crackers from the food pantry, but they're almost gone. She looked embarrassed. I'm really hungry. Tank stood, his decision crystallizing like steel cooling in a forge. Red, get the kid something to eat. Real food, not just chips and soda. He turned to Viper. I want guards posted. Nobody gets near this place without us knowing about it. Tank, Diesel said quietly. If Vega's crew is looking for her, if they think she knows where Miguel stashed whatever he was hiding, then she's already dead if we don't help her. Tank's voice carried the authority of someone who'd led dangerous men through dangerous times. Miguel saved our asses more than once. We owe him. Emma slipped her small hand into Tank's calloused palm. Does this mean you'll help me find my mama and daddy? Tank looked down at her hopeful face and felt his heart break a little. Miguel was almost certainly dead, and probably her mother too. But this kid, this brave, smart little girl, she was alive, and she'd trusted him enough to walk into a den of wolves looking for salvation. Yeah, sweetheart, he said softly. We're going to help you. The ride back to the clubhouse stretched longer than usual, each mile heavy with unspoken tension. Maya sat pressed against Tank's broad back, her small arms wrapped around his waist, while the convoy of Harleys rumbled through the dying light. The sound that usually brought comfort now felt ominous, like thunder before a storm. Tank's mind raced as fast as his engine. Danny's daughter. After 8 years of believing she was dead, killed in the same accident that claimed her mother, here she was, alive, breathing, and asking for help. The implications crashed over him in waves. If Maya was alive, someone had been hiding her. Someone had let Danny believe his child was buried in that tiny casket he'd wept over. The clubhouse came into view, its neon sign casting red shadows across the parking lot. Tank felt Maya's grip tighten as they pulled up to the building. She'd been quiet during the ride, but he could sense her fear radiating through her small frame. Whatever she'd escaped from had left deep marks. It's okay, kid, he murmured as he cut the engine. You're safe now. The other bikers dismounted, their usual boisterous energy subdued. Word had spread quickly through the group about who Maya was, and even the most hardened among them seemed affected by the revelation. Children were sacred in their world, and this particular child carried the weight of their brother's grief. Inside the clubhouse, Tank guided Maya to a worn leather couch while the others gathered around, maintaining a respectful distance. The atmosphere was charged, electric with questions nobody knew how to ask. Maya, Tank said, settling his massive frame into a chair across from her. I need you to tell me everything. How did you get away from those men? How long have they had you? Maya's dark eyes, so much like Danny's, darted around the room before settling on Tank's face. She seemed to be weighing whether she could trust him with the truth. The man who took me, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He said my daddy was bad. He said my daddy hurt people and that I needed to be kept away from him to be good. Her small hands twisted in her lap. But I never believed him. I remembered my daddy's voice singing to me. Tank's jaw clenched. Someone had poisoned this child against her own father, while Danny had been drowning in guilt and whiskey, believing he'd failed to protect his family. Who was this man, Maya? What did he look like? He wore nice suits, had grey hair. The other men called him Mr. Kozlov. Maya's pronunciation was careful, as if she'd practiced saying the name. He had a big house with tall fences and mean dogs. Tank exchanged glances with Ripper, who'd gone pale at the name, Viktor Kozlov, a name that carried weight in their world, a businessman who operated on both sides of the law with connections that reached into every corner of the city's underworld. If Kozlov had Maya, this wasn't just about one lost child. This was about power, leverage, and secrets that could destroy lives. "How did you escape?" Tank asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. "There was a fire," Maya said, her voice growing stronger. "Someone threw something through a window, and everything got bright and hot. The men were yelling and running around. I hid under my bed until the noise stopped. Then I climbed out the window like you're not supposed to." She paused, looking directly at Tank. "I've been walking for 2 days, asking people about the motorcycle men with the wolf on their jackets. I remembered that from when I was little." Tank's throat constricted. She'd remembered their club's patch from when she was barely more than a toddler, had used that memory to guide her to safety. The loyalty of an 8-year-old had accomplished what years of searching hadn't. "Maya," Tank said carefully, "your daddy, he's been looking for you every day since he thought you died. He never stopped believing you might be out there." For the first time since arriving at the clubhouse, Maya smiled. It transformed her entire face, chasing away the shadows and revealing the bright child hidden beneath layers of fear and trauma. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew he'd want me back." Tank stood, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the room. "Ripper, get Danny on the phone. Tell him to get here now, but don't tell him why. Just tell him it's urgent." He turned back to Maya. "Kid, your daddy's going to be here soon, but I need you to understand something. There are going to be people looking for you, bad people who don't want you with your family." Maya's chin lifted with a defiance that reminded Tank strongly of Danny. "I'm not going back to that place. I'd rather stay with the motorcycle men forever." Tank found himself smiling despite the gravity of their situation. "Well then, little wolf, I guess we'd better get ready for a fight." The abandoned gas station sat like a graveyard monument against the pre-dawn sky, its broken windows reflecting the orange glow of the Reaper's bikes. Maya had fallen asleep against Razor's shoulder during the ride, her small body finally succumbing to exhaustion. Now she stirred as the engines cut to silence, one by one. "Where are we?" she whispered, rubbing her eyes. "Safe house," Razor said, dismounting carefully so she wouldn't fall. "We need to regroup, figure out our next move." Tank was already at the perimeter, his massive frame moving with surprising stealth as he checked the surrounding area. Ghost had disappeared entirely, a skill that earned him his road name, while Viper worked on securing their bikes behind the building. The interior of the station was better than its exterior suggested. Someone had converted the back office into a functional hideout. Sleeping bags, canned food, bottled water, and a police scanner that crackled with static. Maya's eyes widened as she took in the space. "You guys live here?" "Sometimes," Razor said, pulling out his phone to check for messages. 3 missed calls from Chains, the club president. His stomach tightened. "When we need to lay low." Tank pushed through the door, his expression grim. "We got company coming. 3 black SUVs, maybe 2 miles out, heading this direction." Maya's face went pale. "They found us." Viper cursed under his breath. "How the hell did they track us here?" Ghost materialized from the shadows near the window. "Helicopter passed over about 10 minutes ago. Thermal imaging, maybe?" Razor knelt beside Maya, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Listen to me, kiddo. We're going to get you out of here, but I need you to tell me everything about your father's work. Whatever you know, no matter how small." Maya's lower lip trembled. "He said he was protecting people, that bad men were trying to hurt families, and he had to stop them." "What kind of bad men?" "Men who sold things that made people sick. Daddy showed me pictures once, of kids who got hurt because of the medicine." She paused, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "He said Uncle Marcus was helping him, but then Uncle Marcus got scared." Tank moved to the window, peering through a gap in the boarded-up glass. 2 minutes out, Ghost was already gathering their essential gear. "Back exit? Blocked by construction equipment," Viper reported. "We'd have to go through them or find another way." Razor's mind raced. The old gas station sat at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. To the east, open farmlands stretched for miles, no cover. West led back toward town and more potential enemies. North was forest, but their bikes would be useless on the rough terrain. "There," Maya said suddenly, pointing to a section of floor near the back wall. "Daddy taught me to look for those." Razor followed her gaze and spotted what she'd seen, a barely visible outline in the concrete. A storm drain access, probably connected to the old highway system. "Smart girl," he said, already moving toward it. "Tank, give me a hand." The metal cover was rusted, but gave way under their combined strength. Below, a concrete tunnel stretched into darkness, just wide enough for a person to crawl through. "Where does it lead?" Ghost asked. "Only one way to find out," Razor said. He looked at Maya. "You up for an adventure?" She nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. The sound of approaching engines grew louder. Through the scanner, they heard coordinated chatter, professional, military-style communication. Whoever was coming wasn't just looking for Maya. They were prepared for a fight. "Go," Tank said, checking his weapon. "I'll buy you time." "Tank, go!" The big man's voice brooked no argument. "Kid needs to live more than I need to die today, but I ain't planning on dying either." Viper clasped Tank's shoulder. 5 minutes, then we follow." Ghost had already disappeared into the tunnel. Maya hesitated at the entrance, looking back at Tank. "Will you be okay, Mr. Tank?" The giant biker's expression softened. "Don't you worry about old Tank, little angel. I've been through worse scrapes than this." She smiled, the first genuine smile Razor had seen from her, and slipped into the tunnel after Ghost. As Razor prepared to follow, Tank grabbed his arm. "Brother, that kid's carrying something bigger than just her father's secrets. Whatever's in that flash drive, people are dying for it." "I know. Question is, what are we willing to die for?" Razor looked down the dark tunnel where Maya had vanished. 24 hours ago, he'd been worried about a rival club's territory dispute. Now he was responsible for a child who might hold the key to exposing a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of power. The sound of car doors slamming echoed outside. "Everything," Razor said, and dropped into the darkness. The morning sun cast long shadows across the compound as Maya sat cross-legged on the picnic table, carefully braiding friendship bracelets from colorful string she'd found in Sarah's craft box. The rhythmic sound of motorcycles being worked on filled the air, punctuated by occasional bursts of profanity and laughter from the garage. "You're gonna make your fingers bleed doing that so tight," Diesel observed, emerging from under the hood of his Harley with grease-stained hands. Despite his gruff exterior, Maya had noticed he always seemed to appear whenever she was alone, like a leather-clad guardian keeping watch. "My mom taught me," Maya replied, not looking up from her intricate work. "She said if you make something with your hands, you put a piece of your heart in it." The big man's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Smart woman, your mama." Before Maya could respond, the rumble of unfamiliar engines echoed from the road beyond the compound's gates. Diesel's entire demeanor shifted, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun tucked into his waistband. Within seconds, the peaceful morning transformed into controlled chaos as club members emerged from various buildings, their movements precise and practiced. "Inside. Now." Diesel's voice carried an authority that brooked no argument. But Maya had already spotted the black SUVs through the chain-link fence, and her small body began trembling uncontrollably. "They found me," she whispered, the friendship bracelet falling forgotten to the ground. Tank appeared at Diesel's side, his scarred face grim. 3 vehicles, tinted windows, could be anyone. "It's them," Maya said with devastating certainty. "Uncle Marcus always uses black cars. He says they're harder to remember." The lead SUV pulled to a stop just outside the gates, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. Even from a distance, his predatory smile was visible as he surveyed the compound with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Maya, sweetheart." His voice carried across the courtyard, sickeningly sweet. Come out, come out. Uncle Marcus has been so worried about you. Diesel felt the child press against his leg, seeking protection. The weight of her trust hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken. This wasn't just about helping a lost kid anymore. This was about standing between innocence and something genuinely evil. You Marcus Kellerman? Diesel called out, his voice deliberately casual despite the tension coiling through his body. I am. And you're harboring my niece. I'm here to collect what's mine. The possessive tone in the man's voice made several of the bikers bristle visibly. These were men who understood ownership, but they also recognized the difference between claiming property and protecting family. Funny thing about that, Tank stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Little girl says she ain't yours to collect. Marcus's laugh was cold and calculating. I'm afraid that's not how the law works, gentlemen. Maya is my responsibility now, and I have the paperwork to prove it. He gestured to one of his companions, who produced an official-looking document. Paperwork can say a lot of things, Diesel replied evenly. Don't make it true. The standoff stretched taut as a wire, both sides measuring the other's resolve. Maya's small voice cut through the tension like a blade. He killed my parents. The words hung in the air, transforming the atmosphere from tense to lethal in an instant. Every member of the Iron Serpents had their own complicated relationship with violence, but harming children crossed a line written in blood. Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and reptilian underneath. Children have such vivid imaginations, don't they? Maya's been through terrible trauma. Sometimes grief makes us say things that aren't quite accurate. I saw you, Maya continued, her voice stronger now. In Daddy's office that night. You thought I was asleep, but I heard everything. You said the business should have been yours. You said they were in your way. The man's composure cracked further. Maya, darling, you're confused. The stress. You're lying. The 8-year-old's accusation rang with the clarity of absolute truth. You made them sign papers, and when Daddy said no, you hurt Mama. I saw the blood on your hands. Diesel felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. This wasn't just about protecting a kid from a bad situation. This was about justice, the kind of justice that didn't wait for courts or proper procedures. Seems like we got ourselves a problem, he said quietly, his words carrying the weight of a death sentence. Marcus must have heard it too, because his hand moved toward his jacket. The movement triggered an instant response from the Iron Serpents, weapons appearing with practiced efficiency. I'd think real careful about your next move, Tank suggested, his shotgun cradled almost lovingly in his arms. The businessman's eyes darted between the armed bikers and the child who held his future in her small hands. His carefully constructed world was unraveling, and everyone present could see the exact moment he decided that desperate times called for desperate measures. The warehouse felt different in the morning light filtering through grimy windows. Maya sat cross-legged on a sleeping bag, methodically eating cereal from a chipped bowl while watching the bikers move around her like she was studying some fascinating documentary. Tank had positioned himself at a workbench nearby, pretending to tinker with engine parts while keeping one eye on her. Uncle Danny used to make pancakes on Saturdays, she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. He'd flip them really high and catch them in the pan. Sometimes he'd miss on purpose just to make me laugh. Viper looked up from the map he'd been studying with Crow and Steele. The mention of Danny always seemed to shift something in his expression, softening the hard edges around his eyes. Yeah? What else did he teach you? Maya's spoon clinked against the bowl. How to change a tire. How to throw a punch without hurting my thumb. How to tell if someone's lying by watching their hands. She glanced meaningfully at Viper's clenched fists. He said people who are scared or angry always make fists when they think no one's looking. Viper slowly uncurled his fingers, a rueful smile crossing his face. Smart kid. Danny always was good at reading people. Is that why you're scared? Maya asked with the brutal honesty only children possessed. Because of the bad men who are looking for me? The warehouse went quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and Tank's sudden stillness at his workbench. Even Razor, who'd been arguing with someone on his phone in the corner, ended his call and moved closer. "We're not scared, little darling," Tank said gently. "We're just being careful." Uncle Danny said being careful and being scared sometimes look the same from the outside, but they feel different on the inside. Maya set down her bowl and studied each of their faces with those unsettling green eyes. "Which one are you?" Steele laughed despite himself. "Damn, Danny, you taught her well." Before anyone could respond, Razor's phone buzzed with an incoming text. His face went grim as he read it. "We've got company coming. 3 black SUVs, maybe 10 minutes out." Someone spotted them asking questions at the diner on Route 47. The warehouse exploded into motion. Viper barked orders while Tank swept Maya up along with her backpack. "Time to go, sweetheart. You remember what we talked about?" Maya nodded solemnly. They'd rehearsed this scenario twice already. If trouble came, she was to stay quiet, stay low, and do exactly what Tank told her. No questions, no arguments. "Where's the nearest safe house?" Viper demanded, checking his sidearm. 20 miles north, but they'll be watching the main roads," Crow replied, already moving toward the bikes. "Then we go off-road." "Maya, you ever been on a dirt bike?" She shook her head, but her eyes lit up with excitement rather than fear. "Uncle Danny said he'd teach me when I got bigger." "Guess you're bigger today." Viper lifted her onto Tank's modified Harley, which had been fitted with extended foot pegs and a makeshift child seat behind the driver. "Hold on tight to Tank and don't let go, no matter what happens." As they prepared to leave, Maya suddenly grabbed Viper's leather jacket. "Wait, I need to tell you something about Uncle Danny, something I wasn't supposed to know." The rumble of approaching engines could be heard in the distance. Viper crouched down to her eye level. "Make it fast, kid." He kept a box hidden under his bed. "I saw him put stuff in it sometimes when he thought I was sleeping. Papers and photos and a gun." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "One of the photos was of you, but you were wearing a uniform, a police uniform." The blood drained from Viper's face. Around them, the other bikers exchanged stunned looks. Steele actually took a step backward. "Maya," Viper said carefully, "are you sure about what you saw?" She nodded emphatically. "You had shorter hair and no beard, but it was definitely you." And there was writing on the back. It said partners and had a date from 5 years ago. Tank's jaw dropped. "Jesus Christ, Viper. Danny was a cop?" "Undercover narcotics," Viper said quietly, his secret finally spilling out after years of careful concealment. "We worked together for 3 years before he went deep cover with the Calabrese family. When his cover got blown, he disappeared into witness protection. I quit the force the day Danny vanished. Couldn't stomach the politics anymore." Viper looked around at his brothers, waiting for the inevitable rejection, the accusations of betrayal. Instead, Tank just shook his head and laughed. "Well, that explains why you're so damn paranoid about police procedures." The sound of engines grew louder. Whatever personal revelations needed processing would have to wait. "Mount up," Viper commanded. "We'll sort this out later. Right now, we've got a little girl to keep safe." Maya squeezed Tank's waist as the bikes roared to life, ready for whatever came next. The warehouse felt different in the pre-dawn darkness, shadows stretching like fingers across the concrete floor where Maya slept curled against Tank's massive frame. Reaper hadn't closed his eyes once during the night, his mind churning over Ghost's intelligence report and the weight of decisions that could get them all killed. "Boss!" Viper's voice cut through the silence, barely above a whisper. "We got movement." Reaper was on his feet before the words fully registered, his hand instinctively moving to the Glock at his waist. Through the grimy windows, he could make out the subtle shift of shadows that didn't belong to the natural landscape. Professional shadows, military precision. "How many?" he asked, already knowing the answer would be too many. "At least a dozen, maybe more positioned where we can't see them." Viper's jaw was tight. "They're not moving in yet, just watching." Maya stirred at the sound of hushed voices, her small face emerging from where she'd burrowed against Tank's leather vest. The big man's protective instincts kicked in immediately, his arms tightening around her as he scanned for threats. "What's happening?" Maya's voice was small but steady. Even at 8 years old, she'd learned to read danger in the air, like others read weather patterns. Reaper crouched beside her, his scarred face gentling in a way that would have shocked anyone who knew his reputation. "Some people want to have a conversation with us, little one, but we're going to make sure you stay safe." Ghost materialized from the shadows near the back entrance, his expression grim. "They've got the building surrounded, but they're maintaining distance. Either they're planning something elaborate, or they're more afraid of us than they're letting on." "Afraid of what we know," Reaper corrected. "Maya, sweetheart, I need you to tell me everything you remember about your father's work. Every detail, no matter how small it seems." She sat up straighter, her dark eyes reflecting wisdom beyond her years. "He had meetings, late at night. Men in expensive suits who made him nervous. He'd lock me in my room, but I could hear them through the walls." Tank's massive hand stroked her hair with surprising gentleness. "What did they talk about, little angel?" "Numbers, always numbers, and places. Afghanistan, Syria, places I couldn't pronounce. And they talked about containers. Daddy seemed scared of them, but he kept taking their money." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Marcus Chen hadn't just been selling information, he'd been facilitating arms shipments to foreign operatives. Maya wasn't just a loose end, she was potential evidence of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military and political power. "Jesus Christ," Diesel breathed from his position near the window. "They're moving." Through the windows, tactical teams emerged from concealment like deadly ghosts, their movements coordinated with military precision. Black SUVs rolled into position, blocking every possible exit route. Red laser dots began dancing across the warehouse walls, sniper positions activated. "They want the girl alive," Reaper said, his mind calculating angles and odds with the cold precision that had kept him breathing through 2 decades of violence. "But they'll burn this place down with all of us in it if they think she's talked too much." Tank shifted Maya behind his bulk, his scarred hands checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. "Then we make sure that doesn't happen." "Boss," Viper called softly, "they're sending someone in under a white flag." Through the main entrance came a figure that made Reaper's blood run cold. Colonel David Morrison, Maya's supposed uncle, walked with the confident stride of a man accustomed to giving orders and having them obeyed without question. Behind him, 2 soldiers in full tactical gear maintained flanking positions. "Mr. Patterson," Morrison called out, using the name from Reaper's military days, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Funny thing about that, Colonel," Reaper replied, stepping into view but keeping Maya safely behind Tank's protective bulk. "Last I checked, little girls don't belong to anyone except their families, and something tells me you're not exactly family." Morrison's smile was cold as winter steel. "You always were too clever for your own good, Patterson. Marcus Chen was a valuable asset until he developed a conscience. His daughter represents a significant security risk that needs to be contained." "You mean eliminated?" "I mean protected. In a secure facility where she can't accidentally share information that might compromise ongoing operations." Maya's voice rang out clear and strong from behind Tank. "You killed my daddy!" The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Morrison's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something predatory and cold beneath the veneer of military propriety. "Accusations from traumatized children are rarely reliable," he said smoothly. "Maya needs professional help to process her grief, medical care that I'm uniquely positioned to provide." Reaper's laugh was harsh as broken glass. "Over my dead body." Morrison's smile returned, sharp-edged and promising violence. "That can certainly be arranged." The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town had seen better decades, but it served the Serpent's purposes perfectly. Maya sat cross-legged on a makeshift bed of old blankets while Diesel worked on cleaning a nasty scrape on her elbow from their hasty escape through the factory's broken fence. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows on the concrete walls covered in graffiti and rust stains. "Hold still, kid," Diesel muttered, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he applied antiseptic. Maya winced but didn't pull away. She'd learned to trust these unlikely protectors over the past few days, even if she didn't fully understand why they were helping her. Tank paced near the entrance, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in hushed, urgent tones. Snake sat backwards on a metal chair, arms crossed over the backrest, watching Maya with an expression she couldn't quite read. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and Tank's muffled conversation. "We can't keep running forever," Snake finally said, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Those weren't street thugs at the factory. Professional hitters don't give up after one miss." Diesel finished bandaging Maya's arm and sat back on his haunches. "You got a better idea? Because last I checked, walking into a police station with a kidnapped kid wasn't exactly in our playbook." "I'm not kidnapped," Maya said quietly, but with conviction that made both men look at her. "I asked for help. There's a difference." Snake's expression softened slightly. "Yeah, well, try explaining that to the cops when they see a little girl with 3 bikers who've got more priors than a phone book." Tank ended his call and walked over, his boots echoing in the cavernous space. His face was grim, the kind of expression that meant bad news was coming. Maya had seen that look before, in her father's eyes during those final weeks, when everything started falling apart. "Rico's got word on the street," Tank said, running a hand through his graying hair. "Contract's still active, but it's bigger than we thought. This isn't just about the kid or what her old man knew. Someone's cleaning house, tying up loose ends." "What kind of loose ends?" Diesel asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "The kind that involves anyone who might have had contact with Castellano's operation in the last 6 months. Tank's eyes met each of his brothers' faces in turn. "That includes us now. We helped the girl, which means we're part of the problem." "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears threatening to spill over. "I didn't know. I just didn't know where else to go." Snake was off his chair and kneeling beside her before she could blink. His scarred face was gentler than she'd ever seen it. "Hey, none of this is on you, understand? Your dad got mixed up with some seriously bad people, but that doesn't make any of this your fault." "Snake's right," Diesel added, his voice rough with emotion. "We made our choice to help you. Nobody forced our hand." Tank nodded agreement, but Maya could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he was weighing options and measuring risks. She'd seen her father make similar calculations in those final weeks, trying to find a way out of an impossible situation. "There might be another way," Tank said slowly, as if the idea was still forming in his mind. "Rico mentioned something else. Word is Castellano's people aren't the only ones looking for Maya. There's apparently someone else, someone with enough juice to make even the mob think twice." "What kind of someone?" Snake asked, suspicion heavy in his voice. "The federal kind. Seems Maya's father wasn't just keeping records for Castellano. He was feeding information to someone else, someone with a badge and the authority to use it." Maya's eyes widened. Her father had never mentioned anything about police or federal agents, but then again, there was a lot he'd never told her about his work. The revelation added another layer of confusion to an already impossible situation. "So, what are you saying?" Diesel asked. "We try to find this Fed and hand her over?" "I'm saying maybe we don't have to keep running," Tank replied. "Maybe it's time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. But first, we need to know exactly what Maya's father told her, and what he might have left behind." All 3 men turned to look at her, and Maya felt the weight of their expectations. Everything hinged on what she knew, what she remembered, what secrets her father might have trusted to an 8-year-old girl who just wanted to go home. The warehouse fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional drip of water from a leaky pipe. Maya sat cross-legged on a stack of old shipping pallets, watching Raven meticulously clean his 45 while the other reapers prepared for what they all knew could be their final ride. The little girl's presence had transformed these hardened criminals into something she'd never seen before, men with purpose beyond themselves. "Tell me about my daddy," Maya said quietly, breaking the tense silence. Raven's hands stilled on the weapon. Around the warehouse, conversations died as the reapers turned their attention to their leader. Tank stopped adjusting his tactical vest. Bones looked up from the map he'd been studying. Even Diesel paused in his ritual of checking and rechecking his knife collection. "Your old man," Raven began slowly, "was the kind of rider every club dreams of having. Fearless, loyal, and smart enough to keep the rest of us idiots alive." He set the gun aside and met Maya's curious gaze. "Tommy Ghost Morrison could slip in and out of anywhere without a sound. That's how he got the name. But he left the Reapers," Maya pressed. "Why?" The question hung heavy in the air. Raven exchanged glances with Tank, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "He fell in love with your mother," Raven continued. "Real love, the kind that changes a man's priorities. Sarah was working as a nurse at County General when Ghost brought in Bones after a bad crash. One look at her, and your father knew his riding days were numbered." Bones chuckled despite the gravity of their situation. "Tommy spent 3 weeks visiting me in that hospital, pretending to check on my recovery. Really, he just wanted excuses to see your mom." Maya's eyes brightened. "Mama never told me they met at a hospital. Your mother probably had a lot of stories she was saving for when you were older," Tank said gently, his massive frame somehow less intimidating as he knelt beside Maya's makeshift perch. "The thing is, kid, your father didn't just leave the club. He earned his way out. There's a difference." "What kind of difference?" Maya asked. Raven leaned forward. "When a Reaper wants out for the right reasons, family, love, a chance at something better, the Brotherhood doesn't just cut ties. We make sure that man and his family stay protected. Forever. That's the code your father helped write." The warehouse door creaked open, and Spider emerged from the shadows where he'd been monitoring their surveillance equipment. His young face was grim as he approached the group. "Multiple vehicles moving in from 3 directions," he reported. "Vincetti's people, but also 2 unmarked vans that don't match their usual profile. Could be federal." Raven stood, his moment of gentle reminiscence evaporating as the warrior reasserted itself. "How long?" 20 minutes, maybe less." The Reapers erupted into controlled chaos. Weapons were shouldered, gear was gathered, and escape routes were mentally rehearsed. But Maya remained seated, watching the controlled pandemonium with curious eyes. "Are you scared?" she asked Raven as he strapped on his shoulder holster. The question stopped him cold. When was the last time anyone had asked him about fear? When was the last time he'd been honest about it? Terrified, he admitted, surprising himself. But sometimes being scared is what keeps you sharp enough to protect what matters. Mama used to say brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you are scared. Raven crouched down until he was eye level with the little girl. "Your mother was a smart woman, and she raised a smart daughter." Tank approached, carrying a small bulletproof vest that looked absurdly oversized for Maya's tiny frame. "Found this in the emergency gear. It'll be too big, but it's better than nothing." As they helped Maya into the protective vest, Bones called out from his position near the window. "Raven, you need to see this." The club president moved to the observation post Bones had established. Through a crack in the boarded windows, he could see the approaching convoy. But something was wrong with the formation. "Those aren't attack positions," Raven muttered, studying the vehicle's approach. "They're boxing us in, but they're leaving escape routes." "Could be incompetence," Tank suggested, joining them at the window. "Or it could be intentional," Spider added, his voice tight with realization. "What if someone wants us to run? What if this whole thing is designed to flush us out?" Raven felt the pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Maya's appearance, the timing of Vincetti's sudden interest, the federal presence. None of it felt random anymore. He turned back to Maya, who was now dwarfed by the bulletproof vest, but wearing it with the solemnity of a knight donning armor. "Maya, honey, I need you to think very carefully. Has anyone else been asking you questions about your family? Teachers, neighbors, anyone who seemed overly interested in you and your mom?" The little girl's expression shifted, innocence giving way to a troubling recognition that made Raven's blood run cold. The compound erupted into chaos as bullets shattered windows and splintered wooden door frames. Maya pressed herself against the concrete wall of the main building, her small frame trembling as gunfire echoed around her. Through the smoke and confusion, she could see Razor diving behind his motorcycle, his weathered face set in grim determination. "How many?" Tank's voice boomed over the din as he returned fire from behind a stack of oil drums. "Too damn many," Ghost replied, his rifle barrel protruding from a second-story window. "Mercenaries, by the look of their gear, professional-grade equipment." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the tactical vests and military precision of their attackers. These weren't random thugs or rival gang members. These men moved like soldiers, coordinated and lethal. She thought of her father's warnings about the people who would come for her, the ones who saw her as nothing more than a bargaining chip in their twisted game. An explosion rocked the compound's eastern wall, sending debris flying. Through the settling dust, dark figures advanced with mechanical efficiency. Razor caught sight of Maya huddled against the wall and made a desperate sprint toward her, zigzagging between cover as bullets whined past his head. "Stay down, kid," he growled, pulling her behind a concrete barrier. His leather jacket was torn at the shoulder, blood seeping through. "We're going to get you out of this." But even as he spoke, Maya could see the doubt in his eyes. The Iron Wolves were outnumbered and outgunned. These weren't street fighters they were dealing with. These were professionals with unlimited resources and no moral boundaries. The safe room in the basement, Tank called out during a brief lull in the gunfire. "Get her to the safe room." Razor nodded grimly and scooped Maya into his arms. They moved in a crouched run along the building's perimeter, staying low as bullets chewed up the ground behind them. The basement entrance was only 30 yards away, but it felt like miles as they dodged between abandoned vehicles and concrete pillars. A sniper's bullet sparked off the metal doorframe just as they reached the entrance. Razor's body jerked, a grunt of pain escaping his lips, but he didn't stop moving. Blood flowed freely from his arm now, but his grip on Maya remained steady and protective. The basement was a maze of storage rooms and mechanical equipment. At the far end, hidden behind a false wall, was the safe room Tank had mentioned, a reinforced bunker the club had built for situations exactly like this. Razor's breathing was labored as he set Maya down and began working the hidden latches. "Listen to me," he said, his voice urgent but gentle. "You're going to hide in here until this is over. No matter what you hear up there, you don't come out until one of us comes to get you. Understand?" Maya nodded, but her eyes were wide with fear. "What if they get you? What if they get all of you?" Razor paused, his hand on the safe room door. Above them, the sounds of battle continued. Shouts, gunfire, the crash of breaking glass. He looked down at this small girl who had somehow become the center of their world, and his expression softened despite the violence raging around them. "Then you wait until it's quiet for a long time, and you use that emergency radio in there to call the number Tank programmed. Someone will come for you." He knelt down to her level, his scarred hands surprisingly gentle on her shoulders. "But that ain't gonna happen, Maya. We've been through worse than this." An explosion shook the building above them, dust raining from the ceiling. Voices could be heard in the upper levels now. The mercenaries had breached the main floor. Razor's jaw tightened as he realized how quickly their defenses were crumbling. "I should have told you something," Maya said suddenly, her voice barely a whisper. "About my dad's work. About why they really want me. Kid, there's no time." "There's a key," she interrupted, pulling a small memory device from her pocket. "He gave it to me before he died. It has everything on it, names, bank accounts, proof of what they've been doing. He said it was insurance, but I think it's the real reason they're hunting me. Razor stared at the device, understanding flooding his features. Maya wasn't just the daughter of a man who'd crossed dangerous people. She was carrying evidence that could destroy them entirely. The stakes had just gotten impossibly higher. Another explosion, closer this time. Heavy footsteps on the stairs leading down to the basement. Time was running out. "Get in there now," Razor commanded, practically pushing Maya into the safe room. "And Maya, if something happens to us, you make sure that Key gets to the right people. Promise me." She nodded as the reinforced door swung shut between them, sealing her into darkness while he turned to face whatever was coming down those stairs. The abandoned warehouse echoed with the sound of boots on concrete as Marcus led the charge through the entrance. His heart hammered against his ribs, but years of combat had taught him to channel fear into focus. Behind him, 6 of his most trusted brothers moved with deadly precision, their weapons drawn and ready. The interior was a maze of rusted machinery and shadows. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The air smelled of motor oil, decay, and something else, something that made Marcus's stomach clench with rage. "Split up," he whispered into his radio, eyes open. "They've got hostages." Tank's voice crackled back. "Copy. Taking the north corridor." Every step felt like an eternity. Marcus had faced down rival gangs, corrupt cops, and dangerous deals gone wrong, but nothing had prepared him for this kind of terror. The thought of Emma in the hands of these animals made his vision blur with fury. A muffled cry echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. Marcus froze, straining to listen. There, a child's voice, barely audible but unmistakably frightened. He moved faster now, abandoning some of his caution. The sound led him through a doorway into what looked like an old office space. Broken windows lined one wall, and debris covered the floor. In the center of the room, 3 men stood around 2 small figures huddled on the ground. Marcus recognized Vincent Kellerman immediately, the man who had destroyed his brother's life and was now threatening to destroy Emma's. Tall and lean with graying hair, Kellerman wore an expensive suit that looked absurdly out of place in the decrepit surroundings. His 2 associates were obviously muscle, bulky and alert, but it was the sight of Emma and another child, a boy about her age, that made Marcus's blood boil. Both children were bound with zip ties, their faces streaked with tears and dirt. Emma's brave mask had finally cracked, revealing the terrified 8-year-old she really was. "Well, well," Kellerman said without turning around. "I was wondering when you'd show up, Marcus Kane. Though I have to admit I expected you sooner." Marcus kept his pistol trained on the man's back. "Let them go, Kellerman. This is between you and me." "Oh, but that's where you're wrong." Kellerman finally turned, his smile cold and calculating. "This is about so much more than just you and me. This is about family, about blood, about the sins of the father being visited upon the children. Emma has nothing to do with what happened to Jake. Emma has everything to do with it." Kellerman's eyes gleamed with malice. "Did you know that your brother tried to back out of our arrangement? Right at the very end, he grew a conscience. Quite inconvenient, really." Marcus felt his finger tighten on the trigger. "You killed him." "I defended my business interests. Jake knew the risks when he started skimming from my operations, but what really sealed his fate was his threat to expose everything if I didn't let him walk away clean." Kellerman gestured toward Emma. "He said he wanted to be a better father, a better man. Touching, really." He rolled to his left, coming up behind a concrete pillar. One of the gunmen was advancing on his position, weapon raised. Marcus took the shot without hesitation, and the man dropped. The second gunman had grabbed Emma, using her as a human shield. Marcus felt his world narrow to a single point of focus. The man was young, nervous, his hand shaking as he pressed the gun to Emma's head. "Stay back," the gunman shouted. "I'll kill her." Time seemed to slow. Marcus could see every detail. The way Emma's eyes found his across the room, the slight tremor in her captor's grip, the angle of the weapon. It was a shot he'd made 1,000 times in training, but never with stakes this high. "You don't want to do this," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the hurricane of emotion raging inside him. "You're just following orders. Walk away now, and you live to see tomorrow." Kellerman laughed from somewhere behind the pillar where he'd taken cover. "Kill her! Kill them both!" But the young gunman was wavering. Marcus could see it in his eyes. Doubt, fear, the realization that he was holding a child's life in his hands. In that moment of hesitation, Emma did something that would haunt Marcus's dreams for years to come. She looked directly at him and mouthed a single word, "Now." Then she bit down hard on her captor's arm. The man screamed and jerked backward. Marcus took the shot. The warehouse erupted into chaos as Marcus's men poured through every entrance. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like deadly fireworks, and the deafening crack of gunfire echoed off the concrete walls. Sarah screamed and pressed herself against Tommy's chest as he shielded her behind an overturned table. "Stay down, little rabbit," he growled, his voice barely audible over the violence. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage on his shoulder, but his grip on his .45 never wavered. Across the warehouse, Diesel's shotgun boomed like thunder as he advanced on 3 men who'd tried to flank them from the east entrance. His massive frame absorbed the recoil without flinching, and his war cry sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Come on, you bastards! This is what you wanted!" Jake darted between concrete pillars with serpentine grace, his twin pistols spitting fire. He moved like a man possessed, every shot calculated, every step deliberate. 2 of Marcus's men went down before they even saw him coming. "Tommy!" Razor's voice cut through the mayhem. "They're trying to circle around the back." Tommy squeezed Sarah's hand. "I need you to crawl to that corner over there, behind those metal barrels. Can you do that for me?" Sarah's eyes were wide with terror, but she nodded. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you. Go." She scrambled on hands and knees across the oil-stained floor while Tommy provided covering fire. A bullet whined past her ear, so close she felt the heat. Another shattered the concrete inches from her fingers, sending sharp fragments flying. Marcus appeared at the main entrance, his expensive suit incongruous among the industrial decay. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd orchestrated this perfectly, flanked by 6 more armed men. His eyes locked onto Sarah's hiding spot across the warehouse. "There she is," he called out, his voice carrying despite the gunfire. "Bring me the girl, and maybe some of you animals will walk out of here." "Like hell!" Diesel roared back, pumping his shotgun. "You want her, you go through us." The biker's words triggered a fresh wave of violence. Marcus's men pressed forward with renewed aggression, their superior numbers beginning to tell. Tommy counted at least 15 shooters, maybe more. His own crew was down to 4, and they were running low on ammunition. Razor took a bullet in the thigh and went down cursing, but kept firing from the ground. His face was a mask of pain and determination. "These sons of bitches don't know who they're messing with." Jake suddenly appeared beside Tommy, breathing hard. "We can't hold this position much longer. They're going to overrun us. Any bright ideas?" "Actually, yeah." Jake pointed toward a cluster of metal drums near the far wall. "See those containers? Industrial solvent. Diesel noticed them earlier. Highly flammable." Tommy followed his gaze and understood immediately. "You're talking about bringing this whole place down. Better than letting Marcus get his hands on her." Jake glanced toward Sarah's hiding spot. "Kid deserves better than what he's got planned." A burst of automatic fire forced them both down as bullets chewed up the table they were using for cover. Splinters of wood exploded around them like shrapnel. "Do it," Tommy said, "but give me 30 seconds to get Sarah to the back exit." Jake nodded grimly. 30 seconds. Tommy sprinted across the open floor in a zigzag pattern, bullets tracking his movement. One grazed his calf, sending him stumbling, but he reached Sarah's position. She threw herself into his arms. "We're leaving right now," he said urgently. "Hold on to me and don't let go." They ran toward the rear of the warehouse as Jake took careful aim at the solvent drums. His first shot sparked off harmlessly, but his second found its mark. The explosion was instantaneous and devastating. The blast wave knocked Tommy and Sarah to the ground just as they reached the back door. Behind them, a wall of fire raced across the warehouse floor, consuming everything in its path. Men screamed as they scrambled for exits that were suddenly blocked by flames. Tommy hauled Sarah to her feet and kicked open the door. Cool night air hit their faces as they stumbled outside. Diesel emerged from a side exit, supporting a limping Razor. Both men were singed and bleeding but alive. Jake was the last one out, his eyebrows scorched off and his leather jacket smoking. "Well, that was fun," he said dryly. The warehouse blazed behind them like a funeral pyre. From inside came shouts and the sound of men trying to escape the inferno. Tommy counted at least 6 figures silhouetted against the flames, including one that looked like Marcus. "This isn't over," Tommy said quietly, watching the fire consume their temporary refuge. "He'll come after us again." Sarah tugged on his jacket. "Tommy, are we safe now?" He looked down at her soot-stained face and realized the question had no easy answer. They'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. Marcus Delacroix was still alive, still dangerous, and still determined to claim what he believed was his. "For now, little rabbit," Tommy said softly. "For now." "You're lying," he whispered. But even as the words left his lips, he could see it. The stubborn set of her jaw that matched his own, the way she held her ground despite being terrified, the fierce defiance in her dark eyes that he recognized from looking in mirrors after particularly brutal fights. Maria stepped closer, her small hand reaching into her torn jacket pocket. "Mama gave me this before they took me. She said if I ever found you, I should show you." She pulled out a tarnished silver locket, its surface scratched and dented from years of careful hiding. Snake's breath caught. He knew that locket, had saved for months to buy it for Carmen when Maria was born. Inside was a photo of the 3 of them. Him, without his colors, clean-shaven and trying to be the man Carmen deserved, holding their newborn daughter while Carmen smiled at the camera with exhausted joy. "Open it," Maria said, holding it out to him. With hands that had killed without hesitation, Snake gently took the locket. The tiny catch stuck, just like it always had, and he pressed it the way he remembered, a slight twist, then pressure. The locket opened with the same soft click it had made years ago. The photo was faded now, but unmistakably them. In the opposite side, Carmen had tucked a tiny curl of baby hair that matched the tangled mess, now framing his daughter's face. "Carmen kept you away from me," Snake said, his voice breaking. "Said I was too dangerous, that my life would get you killed. I thought, when she died, I thought you died with her in that fire." "I almost did." Maria's voice was barely above a whisper, but Mrs. Chen pulled me out. "Then the state took me, moved me around, foster homes, group homes. They said my daddy was a criminal and I was better off without him." She looked up at him, and he saw tears mixing with the dirt on her cheeks. "But I remembered your name, your real name. And I remembered Mama saying you rode with devils but had an angel's heart." Chains stepped forward, his usually gruff voice gentle. "Boss, we need to move. Those bastards who took her aren't going to give up." As if summoned by his words, the sound of motorcycles roared outside the warehouse. Multiple engines running hard and fast. Snake's head snapped toward the sound, his paternal instincts warring with his survival training. "Serpents," Gunner growled, peering through a crack in the boarded windows. "At least 20 of them. They've got the front covered." "Back exit?" Snake asked, already knowing the answer from Chain's expression. "Blocked." They came prepared. Chains checked his weapon methodically. "Someone told them exactly where we'd be." Snake looked down at Maria, seeing the fear creeping back into her eyes. In the span of 10 minutes, he'd gone from ruthless killer to father, and every instinct screamed at him to protect her. But 20-4 odds meant somebody was going to die today. "There's a storm drain," Maria said suddenly, "behind the building. Too small for grown-ups, but I could fit. I've been hiding in places like that for weeks." "No." The word came out harsher than Snake intended. "I just found you. I'm not losing you again, but if I stay, we all die." Maria's logic was devastating in its simplicity. If I go, I can get help. Call the police. Police don't help people like us, Razor muttered, but there was respect in his voice as he looked at the 8-year-old strategizing their survival. The engines outside cut off, replaced by the sound of boots on gravel and the metallic clicks of weapons being prepared. A voice boomed across the distance. Victor Serpens himself. We know you're in there, Snake. Send out the girl and we'll make this quick. Snake's jaw clenched. Quick meant bullets to the back of the head instead of the prolonged torture Victor preferred. Either way, Maria would disappear back into whatever hell she'd escaped from. I know another way, she whispered urgently. There's a ladder in the drain that goes up to the street 6 blocks away. I can bring help. What kind of help? Snake asked, though he was already moving toward the back of the warehouse, his brothers flanking them. The kind that wears badges and asks questions later. Maria's smile was grim, far too old for her face. Sometimes the system works, Daddy. You just have to know which buttons to push. Outside, Victor's patience was wearing thin. 1 minute, Snake, then we come in shooting. Snake knelt down, cupping his daughter's face in his scarred hands. Promise me you'll run fast. Promise me you'll stay alive long enough for me to save you back. The warehouse erupted in chaos as smoke grenades crashed through the skylights, filling the air with thick grey clouds. Sarah pressed herself against Marcus's chest as the Reapers dove for cover behind shipping containers and motorcycles. Through the haze, red laser dots danced across the concrete walls like deadly fireflies. Federal agents. Nobody move. Marcus wrapped his arms protectively around Sarah, his massive frame shielding her from the tactical teams pouring through every entrance. Tank rolled behind a workbench, assault rifle already in his hands, while Reaper positioned himself near the main door, calculating escape routes that no longer existed. Sarah Hoffman. Agent Morrison's voice cut through the smoke. We know you're here. Step away from the criminals and no one gets hurt. Sarah's small voice trembled against Marcus's vest. They're not criminals. They saved me. I know, little one, Marcus whispered, his eyes scanning the warehouse as federal agents took positions. But sometimes good guys and bad guys look the same to people who don't know the whole story. Detective Rodriguez emerged from behind the tactical team, hands raised peacefully. Marcus, I know you can hear me. Let's talk about this. Sarah needs medical attention, and you know this ends badly if we do it the hard way. Marcus felt Sarah's grip tighten on his leather jacket. After everything they'd been through, the desperate flight through the city, the showdown with Vincent Kane's men, the promise he'd made to keep her safe, it couldn't end like this. Not with her being torn away by people who saw only his colors and reputation. Marcus, Tank called out, his voice steady despite the weapons trained on him. Your call, brother. The biker president closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of leadership and an 8-year-old girl's trust pressing down on him. When he opened them, his decision was made. Sarah, he said gently, kneeling to her eye level, remember what we talked about? Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting. Sometimes it's knowing when to trust people. Her wide eyes filled with tears. But what about you? What happens to my guardian angels? Before Marcus could answer, new voices erupted from the tactical team's radios. All units, we have multiple vehicles approaching the perimeter. Black SUVs, government plates. Agent Morrison's confident expression faltered as the warehouse doors burst open again. This time, men in expensive suits entered, followed by a woman Sarah recognized immediately. Aunt Jennifer. Sarah broke free from Marcus and ran toward the woman, who dropped to her knees with tears streaming down her face. Oh, sweetheart, thank God you're safe. Jennifer Hoffman wrapped her niece in her arms, then looked up at Marcus with gratitude that needed no words. Behind her, a stern-faced man in a federal jacket approached Morrison. Agent, you're out of jurisdiction. This operation is being transferred to our task force. Task force? Morrison's face reddened. We've been tracking these bikers for months. The girl is evidence in our RICO investigation. The girl is a victim who needs her family. not a political pawn in your career advancement. The federal supervisor's voice carried the weight of higher authority. Vincent Kane is in custody. His trafficking network is dismantled. These men helped make that possible. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward, badge visible. Sir, I can vouch for their cooperation. Without the Reaper's assistance, we never would have located Kane's operation or recovered Sarah safely. Sarah pulled away from her aunt and walked back to Marcus, who remained kneeling where she'd left him. The entire warehouse, federal agents, bikers, and officials, watched as she reached up and hugged his neck. Thank you for keeping your promise, she whispered. You're the best guardian angel ever. Marcus's weathered face cracked into a genuine smile as he returned the embrace. You stay brave, little warrior, and remember, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who stand with you when everything falls apart. Tank slowly emerged from cover, hands visible, followed by the other Reapers. The federal supervisor nodded to his agents, who began lowering their weapons. There will be paperwork, he announced. Statements, debriefings, formalities, but no arrests today. Agent Morrison started to protest, but Jennifer Hoffman's voice cut him off. My brother trusted these men with his daughter's life. He left instructions in his will. If anything happened to him, if Sarah was ever in danger, Marcus Richardson had full authority to protect her by any means necessary. She pulled out a legal document, hands shaking slightly. Robert knew his business partners weren't all legitimate. He knew Sarah might need protection from people his money and connections couldn't touch. He chose guardian angels who ride steel because sometimes that's exactly what innocence needs. As Sarah walked back to her aunt, she turned for one last look at the leather-clad men who had changed her life. Marcus touched 2 fingers to his temple in a small salute, which she returned with a smile that lit up the smoky warehouse. The warehouse erupted into chaos as Viper's men stormed through the entrance, automatic weapons blazing. Tank threw himself over Emma, his massive frame shielding her as bullets shattered concrete around them. The serpents scattered for cover, their own weapons appearing with practiced precision. Get her out of here, Reaper bellowed over the gunfire, emptying his clip into the advancing mercenaries. 3 of Viper's men dropped, but more kept coming through the smoke-filled doorway. Tank scooped Emma up and sprinted toward the back exit, but explosions rocked the building as grenades detonated. The rear wall collapsed in a thunderous cascade of debris, trapping them inside. Emma clung to Tank's neck, her small face buried against his leather vest as the world exploded around them. There! Emma pointed through the chaos at a maintenance ladder leading to the upper catwalks. Tank didn't hesitate, his boots pounding up the metal rungs as bullets pinged off the steel framework below. From their elevated position, Emma could see the full scope of the battle. The serpents had taken defensive positions behind overturned tables and machinery, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Reaper moved like a ghost through the shadows, his knife finding throats with lethal efficiency. Bones had commandeered a mounted machine gun, laying down suppressing fire that kept the mercenaries from advancing. But even Emma could see they were losing. That's when she spotted him, Viper himself, emerging from the smoke like a nightmare made flesh. His scarred face twisted into a predatory grin as he surveyed the carnage, a high-powered rifle cradled in his arms. There's my little princess, Viper called out, his voice carrying over the gunfire. Time to come home. Tank's grip tightened protectively around Emma. Like hell, he growled. Viper raised his rifle, the scope glinting in the warehouse's harsh lighting. But before he could fire, a motorcycle engine roared to life somewhere in the chaos below. Chain had somehow reached his bike and was weaving through the battle, drawing Viper's attention away from the catwalks. Now! Tank descended the ladder with Emma still in his arms, moving toward where Reaper was pinned down behind an overturned workbench. We need to end this, Reaper said grimly, blood streaming from a graze across his temple. They'll wear us down eventually. Emma squirmed free from Tank's protective embrace. I know how to stop him, she said quietly. Both men stared at her. Emma, no, Tank said firmly. Whatever you're thinking... He won't hurt me, she interrupted, her voice carrying a strange certainty. Not while he thinks I'm valuable to him, but if I can get close enough. She pulled something small and silver from her pocket, a pendant that had belonged to her mother, its surface polished to a mirror shine. My mom always said this would protect me. She was right, just not how she thought. Reaper's eyes widened as he understood. Kid, that's insane. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong, Emma said with the quiet conviction that had sustained her through 8 years of hell. Trust me. Before either man could stop her, Emma stood up from behind their cover, her small hands raised. Uncle Marcus, she called out, using Viper's real name for the first time in years. I'm ready to come home now. The gunfire stuttered to a halt as every eye in the warehouse turned toward the small figure standing amid the destruction. Viper lowered his rifle, that terrible smile returning to his face. That's my smart girl, he said, stepping over bodies as he approached. I knew you'd see reason eventually. Emma walked toward him with measured steps, the pendant hidden in her palm. Tank and Reaper tensed behind their cover, ready to move the instant things went wrong. I missed you, Emma lied convincingly as Viper knelt to her level, his rifle set aside for the reunion. His scarred hands reached for her face with mock tenderness. Daddy's here now, Viper murmured. We're going to have such wonderful times together. Emma smiled up at him, the same innocent smile that had once melted hearts before her world turned dark. Then, with movements too quick for Viper to counter, she angled the pendant's polished surface to catch the warehouse's bright lighting and reflect it directly into his eyes. Viper cursed and stumbled backward, temporarily blinded. In that instant, Tank and Reaper burst from cover, while Chain roared past on his motorcycle, clothes lining 2 mercenaries who had been moving to flank them. The battle's tide turned in seconds. Disoriented and robbed of their leader's coordination, Viper's men found themselves outflanked and outfought by bikers who had survived countless wars on asphalt and concrete. When the smoke finally cleared, Viper lay unconscious at Emma's feet, zip-tied and defeated. His surviving mercenaries had either fled or joined their boss in restraints. Emma stood in the sudden quiet, still holding her mother's pendant. Around her, the serpents began emerging from cover, battered but victorious. Well, Reaper said, wiping blood from his knife, that's one way to end a war. Emma looked up at him, then at Tank, then at all the dangerous men who had risked everything for one lost little girl. For the first time in years, she was truly safe.